Alright, so this is the review for the midterm coming up, and I'll try to fly through this pretty quick. I'm looking at the test right now, and I'll just give you the general ideas that you need to know as we go through. So make sure you know relative location, what that means. That's on your review. Make sure you know the difference between degrees of latitude and longitude. Longitude lines run north and south, they connect the poles, whereas in latitude run east and west. And then make sure you know your different hemispheres. So eastern hemisphere is east of the prime meridian, western hemisphere is west of the prime meridian, and then southern hemisphere, of course, south of the equator, northern is north of the equator. And know generally where your continents are and what hemisphere they'd be in. You know what a topographic map is, which shows natural and man-made features like elevation, things of that sort. Know that map projection is when it's just saying that you draw a map on a 2D surface. So you take it from a globe, draw it on a 2D surface, and it creates distortions whenever you do that. Obviously know what a globe is, three-dimensional representation of the Earth. Tundra, that's going to be in very cold areas such as the Arctic, and it's treeless and flat. Pretty much nothing grows there. You know what tsunami is? Of course, it's a giant wave usually caused by an earthquake most of the time. You know what seismograph is, and that measures the waves from an earthquake. Tells you how strong the earthquake was. The Ring of Fire, generally know what's around there. Obviously, earthquakes and volcanoes is what it's known for. Diffusion, that's the spread of ideas and customs from one society to another, so it's diffused all over the world, kind of like blue jeans. Acculturation, that's when one culture adopts the customs of another one. So that'd be like China adopting blue jeans as a style of clothing to wear. You notice the difference between polytheistic and monotheistic. Polytheistic, believe many gods. Monotheistic is one god. The Columbian Exchange, you need to know in general what happened there, and basically that was an exchange of food, plants, animals, diseases, things like that from the eastern hemisphere to the western hemisphere. So from Europe and Africa, which is mainly in the eastern hemisphere, over to the western hemisphere, the Americas. Alright, know what infrastructure is, which is basically all of your systems like sewer system, transportation, electricity, all those things, and how that helps the city run. It's the infrastructure. And you know what a representative democracy is. That's where people run the government. Basically, we elect officials that are representatives that represent us and vote on laws. Free enterprise system, that's where the government has little control whatsoever over the economy, and resources and businesses are owned by private citizens and operated for profit. A megalopolis, that's where you have several large cities in the suburban areas that all run together. Kind of like Boswash, we talked about that. Boston, New York City, Philly, Baltimore, and DC. Urban sprawl, that's where you have development without any planned growth. It just keeps spreading out, and there's no real plan to it, and it spreads out. You know why most of Canada's urban industrial growth happened near the U.S. border, and that has to do with milder climate in the southern part of Canada, the fertile soils for farming, and the railway system that connects them all. You know how the Prime Minister in Canada is elected, and that's from the majority party in Parliament. So whichever party wins majority in Parliament, the leader of that party becomes Prime Minister. The factories along the U.S. border that help with manufacturing goods are maquiladoras. They're along the U.S.-Mexico border. You know who colonized Brazil, which was Portugal. Remember, the rest of Latin America, majority of it at least, was Spain. But Brazil was the Portuguese. As far as the rainforest and destruction of the rainforest, the farming method that's used that destroys a lot of the rainforest is slash and burn. That's where natives will cut down a lot of the trees and then burn it to get nutrients there in the soil and then use it for a few years. And you know permafrost, which is of course soil that's permanently frozen. You see that in Siberia. And you know the influences on Mexican culture, which you can see in the art and obviously their language and their religion and things of that sort. And that's going to be native Indians and then the Spanish. So you have those two influences that come together to create Mexican culture. And the Caribbean, you know how that's different than Central America and Mexico. The Caribbean was influenced by more than just Spain. They were influenced by other European countries like France and Great Britain, as well as Africans, since the Caribbean especially had a lot of African slaves, whereas Mexico had no slaves whatsoever. So you know what aquifer is, and that's obviously water underground, a big collection of it that can be used by a large population. Rain shadow. Rain shadow is where it rains on the windward side of the mountain, and then on the leeward side of the mountain it's really dry. The moisture cannot make it over onto the leeward side. You know where the Andes are located? The Andes Mountains on the west coast of South America. And you know what Nunavut was? Nunavut was the territory created in Canada for the Inuits. They wanted their own homeland, or at least a territory, and so Canada created Nunavut for them back in 1999. You know where most of the French Canadians live, and that's in Quebec. Mestizos, that term you need to know. That is the mixture of Native American and European blood creates mestizos, and most of your Mexicans, about 90%, are mestizo. North American Free Trade Agreement, which created a free trade zone between U.S., Canada, and Mexico, and decreased tariffs. Got rid of them, really. The hydrosphere, that's the area that holds all the water in the world, so that's the oceans, the clouds, obviously rain, streams, lakes, all that kind of stuff, all makes up the hydrosphere, and of course most of the water in the hydrosphere is in the ocean. And you know what time of year the North Pole is closest to the sun, so when the Earth is tilted towards the sun, of course so it's tilted towards it, but what part of it's hitting it more directly, and that's going to be during the summer solstice. Your different type of zones when it comes to where tectonic plates meet, and so there's divergent, convergent, and transform. Divergence where they pull apart, convergence where they hit together, and transform is where they rub against each other sideways. You know what Central Business District is, and that's where you see most of the commercial activity of the city, so it's like the downtown area. Subsistence agriculture, that's where families farm just enough food for them to survive, but really have nothing else extra to sell. Alright, also you need to know demographic characteristics in your more developed countries like the United States. Here in the U.S. we have low birth rates because kids cost more to have, and so we tend to have less of them. And also people are more focused on careers and things of that sort. And we also live much longer than most people in the world. So with low birth rates, but high life expectancy as far as how long we're going to live. Alright, some other key terms you need to know. Convection, that's heat rising in the air, air rising. El Nino, that's the warming of the ocean off the west coast of South America that changes all the climate and weather around the world, especially in the Pacific area of the world. Of course, you know what greenhouse effect is. That's where gases get trapped within the lower part of the atmosphere, and it creates a greenhouse effect of warming of the Earth's temperature, surface temperature. Know what ocean currents are and how they affect climate. Then some governments you need to know. You need to know what a state is, which is a country. A nation is a group of people that share a common heritage and culture and background. Democracy is, of course, where people have the power and they elect officials. A monarchy is a king or queen that rules and is passed down through the family. Communism is where the government controls all means of production. Same thing as command economy. A theocracy is where religion or religious leaders control the government. And fascism is like Nazi Germany or something like that. You have a dictator and there's two groups of people. You have the ruling class and the class that's being ruled. So basically survival of the fittest. Now you need to know what San Diego, LA, San Fran, Portland, Seattle, and Vancouver all have in common. They're all along the west coast of the United States and Canada. And the reason why they're such large cities is because they're big trading partners with Asia. So trade across the Pacific hits all those cities. The melting pot theory in the U.S., that's the idea that cultures come together and we all blend together and create a unique American culture. That's not really happening, though, anymore. It used to, back in the early 1900s, but now people come here and we kind of hold more to our own cultural heritage. So instead of a melting pot, we're more of a salad bowl. We're all there together, but we stay separate. Alright, if the U.S. Congress puts high tariffs on products, you know the effects of that on our economy. What that does is it helps create more manufacturing within the United States, because if we're putting tariffs on goods coming from the outside, that means we're trying to encourage growth within our own country. And so instead of buying products from another country, we buy here something that's made in the U.S., try to encourage our own growth. You know what the westerlies are? Those are winds that travel from the west to the east. Those are the dominant winds over the United States towards Europe. Make sure you know your 5 themes of geography: location, place, human, environment, interaction, movement, and region. And be able to give examples for those. That's in Chapter 1, Section 1. And you know that most Americans work in the service industry, about 75%, which is why we are richer. You also need to know where Americans are moving to now. Hold on one second, I'm checking my time. Okay. Most Americans now have been moving to the area or the region known as the Sun Belt, which is the South, basically. So that's where we see most movement. You know the reason why the St. Lawrence Seaway was created, and that was allow ships from the Atlantic Ocean to get through the Great Lakes all the way into Chicago and trade with those cities along the Great Lakes. And you know the main trading partner of Canada is the U.S., obviously because of our proximity. You know that Canada is controlled by a parliament. You know the rate of natural increase and what can cause that to go up or down. Consequences of building a fence along the U.S.-Mexico border. The biggest consequence of that is it causes Mexicans to try to cross in other areas, usually out in the middle of the desert, and a lot of them end up dying from heat exhaustion and things of that sort. So it ends up in the deaths of a lot of people in areas where it's pretty barren. You know what per capita income refers to, which is the average amount of money a person makes in a country. Canada's cultural mosaic, what that means that in Canada, instead of kind of all coming together, they've kept their cultures separate, and so they've retained their own cultural identities instead of forming together. And the reason why Latin American countries can't take part in the free market system at this point, or haven't been able to, is their lack of education. And because they have a lack of education, they cannot get meaningful jobs that really produce much of anything. So therefore, their economies always struggle. An oligarchy, that is where a few powerful people rule the entire society, entire country. Goal of land reform in Latin America, and that's to divide the land and wealth up more evenly, so it's basically socialism. A junta, that is a military government that takes over. Again, we saw this in Latin America. Primary economic activities, make sure you know examples of those. And then we got a map question, a chart question, another chart question, another chart. Okay. Most of the questions are straight up multiple choice, generally definitions and things like that. A lot of these questions you've seen before in previous tests, so it really isn't too difficult. Just do your review, watch this video a few times, come in from tutoring if there's a few things you don't know, but overall you should be able to do very well in this quite easily. Most of it's straight up multiple choice. There's a few questions that are maps and charts, about 10 or 12. And then there's like 1 or 2 vignettes that you have to read and answer some questions on that. But majority of it is just knowing your main keywords, terms, and being able to provide examples for all of those. So again, got any questions, just come in and let me know. I'll see y'all soon.